Hello, welcome back to RS Thinks. We're currently on our journey still around the charging wasteland of the UK. We're currently in Wales at the moment, and as you may have seen in the previous video where you've probably gone through this whole trip with you, Gary's been driving my ID.3. So I just thought we could ask Gary what his opinion is of the car, because he's actually driven it once before, but it was literally around the car park, just to have a look when I first got it. So obviously he's been driving it for a couple of hours now, so I just wondered what you think of it. What's it been like for you?
Oh, hideous car to drive. Awful driving position. No, seriously. I currently drive the Kia Soul, the 30 kilowatt hour version, which I absolutely love. And if you get onto my podcast, you'll see me talking about that ad infinitum. So I'm at that stage now where my lease is coming up for renewal. So I'm looking at what I'm going to renew it with. And there's a couple of options I've got. Obviously, I'd like a new Kia Soul. It might be just a little bit outside my price range, but I'm very, very interested in the ID.3. So having the opportunity to drive it is absolutely fantastic. And I'm a big fan of Volkswagens. I've driven Volkswagen Golfs for any number of years back in the day, and you know, sitting in something like that, it's a very familiar place to sit down. It all seems, even though the layout doesn't necessarily seem the same as one of the Golfs, you know, it's undeniably a Volkswagen. It's got the build quality of a Volkswagen. It's got, you know, with the screens and it's well designed, it's well laid out. There are a couple of things that particularly caught my attention. For example, I'm a big fan now, having used it, of the adaptive cruise control. Not something that I've got on my version, in fact not something I've ever had on a vehicle. Obviously I've had cruise control, but the adaptive version is actually superb, in as much as obviously it will keep a distance between you and the car in front of you, but you know, the kind of functionality I wasn't really aware of at the time was the automatic speed recognition. So we're on the motorway, we went from a 70 zone into a 50 zone, it automatically recognised that, automatically dropped the speed down without me having to deal with anything. When we come out of that zone, we went back to 70 and it was able to deal with that as well. So really, really like that as a bit of functionality. The car itself is very nippy. I believe it's the top end motor.
Yeah, it's the 150 kilowatt motor, which gives you just over 200 horsepower. So
yeah, so you know, you put your foot down and you get from A to B quite rapidly, which I do like. Good readout on the screen. It's not a huge screen, but it's well, you know, it's laid out well. We've also been using, or while I was driving it, we were using the Apple CarPlay. That's a good implementation of it on this particular model. So very, very happy about that.
So what did you think about the driving position then? How does it compare to your Soul?
I tend to drive sort of fairly low down. I have the seats low down and I have the steering wheel low down. I think one of the things I've realised on the ID.3 is the gap between the steering wheel and the seat is a lot more than it is on mine. So I've had to drop the wheel down a lot more than I would normally. But the good thing about that is because the binnacle is actually attached to the steering column, it means that you can actually drop it down without losing access or vision on the binnacle, whereas on mine, because if I move the wheel down, the binnacle stays where it is, so the top of the steering wheel can actually end up hiding part of the screen, which obviously you don't want.
Yeah.
But it's good. I like it.
What do you think about the cabin? Because some people say the cabin's quite minimalist and they're looking for buttons for things, and because everything's in the screen, you kind of have to alter your focus from looking at the road to look at the screen to your button. How was that?
I'm a big fan of buttons. Friend of my podcast and friend of ours, Simon, always tells me off because one of the things I dislike about the Tesla Model 3 is that there is no button to open the glove compartment. You physically got to press two buttons on the screen to actually get it to open, and I can't see the sense in that. So I'm a big fan of actual practical buttons. Obviously, on the ID.3 and the ID.4, they're not buttons per se, that these are haptic feedback ones, which they do take a little bit of getting used to, but to me they're still a lot better than having to press buttons themselves on a screen. Having said that, there are far fewer of them than say on my, so I've got a bank of them down here that control the heated steering wheel and the heated seats and things like that, which are all in the software.
Yeah, there's usually like lots of buttons for the air control, air conditioning, isn't
Yeah.
there? The speeds, the heat, the temperatures.
Yeah.
All that is, of course, in the screen as well.
Screen.
So.
And providing they're intuitive and easy to get to, it's not really an issue. It's when you need to get something quickly, and you can't, like, you look at the Model 3 and the lights are all controlled by the screen, whereas on here, you hit one button, you're there. Whereas on the Model 3, you've got to hit this button or slide this part of the screen to get to what you want, and then hit that. Which, if you're looking at this from a autonomous driving point of view, that's the best way to go. But while you've still got a driver who has to share their attention between driving and looking at the screen, that can be an issue. Doesn't seem to be a major issue for a lot of people. I'm not aware of any major accidents that have occurred in Teslas through that happening. But again, that's one of the reasons why I much prefer something that's there. You press the button, you turn the stalk or whatever it is, the lights come on. So
And then I've been quite vocal about the lane assist in this car. Like, I absolutely hate it. I turn it off every journey. Mm-hmm. But you actually wanted to keep it on. So why was that, and how did you find it?
Well, obviously it's new, so it's a bit of a toy. So I like to play with it. I think the concept is really, really good. The fact that you can go down the motorway and it will automatically keep you within the lane. I think in principle that's very good. In practice, it tends to do a little bit of the the ping ponging. So it'll take you to pinball. So it'll take you to one side and then back to the other and back to the other, which can be a little bit annoying. But there were a number of occasions when the road curved around and I sort of didn't really take my hands off the wheel, but I loosened the grip enough to let the car actually drive it around using the lane keeping assist. So at the moment, with it being something new for me, I'm quite happy to keep it on. I mean, obviously your experience is that having driven with it for a while, you turn it off, and that's indeed the first thing you did when you got back into the driving seat. And I'm okay with that. I may end up doing that if I end up with an ID.3. I'll drive it for a couple of weeks and then that's going off.
Yeah, I find it worse when it's on a really narrow country lane. We're not actually on any at the moment driving to Wales, but I'm sure they're going to come up. But the fact that I've got it off will stop the irritation for me. Just thought I'd ask about that. Have you got a favourite feature you've seen so far, or anything you're not so keen on?
One of the things that didn't worry me so much when I was driving, but now that a passenger, you can't actually see this, the fascia in front of us has a large amount of light-covered plastic in front of the passenger. Now, what that's doing, obviously, again, you can't see it because the camera's pointing this way. When the sun shines in, it gives a very noticeable glare on the windscreen. If that had happened on the driver's side, that would make it very difficult to view. But obviously, on the driver's side, they've changed the design slightly, so it's a lot darker. And that's one of the reasons I don't necessarily like vehicles that have the full white interior. They have to have a dark area in front, otherwise you just end up with a glare on the windscreen, which is a bit of a pain. It's more noticeable in the passenger side. It's a lot less noticeable on the driver's side because of the way they've designed it. So that's the only sort of glitch that I can see at the moment.
Yeah, that's one thing that I had when I borrowed the ID.3 from the EV Experience Centre. That had the full white interior, full white dash, and I really didn't like that at all. I much prefer the darker one, and if I could get rid of this lighter panel on there, and the option would be black, then I would always go for black myself anyway, for the same reason.
Yeah.
So did you find it quite spacious, sitting in the front? I know we've got a load of stuff in the back as well, but how does it compare with space in your soul?
Well, I'm looking at this, I've got my knees up here, and there's, the best part of a foot between my knee and the dash there. So because it's built on is it the MEB platform?
MEB, yeah.
So obviously you've got the skateboard, you don't have an engine in front, so they've been able to push a lot of that forward. It gives you a lot more space inside than something such as the Soul, which is built, especially the version that I've got, which is actually a fossil fuel version that they've converted to electric. So it still has the same dimensions inside as the petrol engine one. So it is noticeably spacier inside here than it is inside mine.
Yeah, it is really well packaged. As you say, the front and rear overhangs are really tiny, and they say that it's a polo-sized car or a golf-sized car, but with a Passat-sized interior.
Yes.
And that is like a perfect analogy. There's so much space inside.
There is.
Where it counts, because you don't have all the sort of ICE legacy stuff that's carried forward under the bonnet. The bonnet is tiny in comparison. So
now there is the sort of the flip side to that is, you know, between my knees and the bottom of the windscreen, 3 feet.
Yeah, the windscreen is quite a way. Like, I can reach out like this and I can't even touch it.
So my question is there a better way of using that space? Could we move everything a little bit further forward and free up even more space in the back, or even more boot space? I'm not sure. Maybe there are other issues around that. But to me, I'm just wondering whether there is. We've gone to the extreme of having additional space, which is all good and it's airy and light, and that's fine. But have we lost something, or have we missed an opportunity in the design to make better use of that space than is at the moment?
Just on that, looking at the spy shots and the footage of the id.buzz, which is the van based on the same platform.
Yeah.
Obviously, everything of that is pushed forward, isn't it? You've got engine and everything in the back, batteries in the knees, so you've got nothing at the front. So that's kind of an example of what you're actually saying.
It is, and I've got to say, when I first saw the concept for the ID, but loved it, absolutely loved it.
I really like it.
Some of the spy shots I've seen of the current version that they've got, maybe not so much, but you know, they're spy shots, they'll have camouflage on, etc. So you know, we'll take that with a pinch of salt. But yes, the whole idea of, exactly as you say, you know, they've pushed everything forward. They've got a huge amount of space in there. That's going to be really popular for people who want to transform it into a camper. And you know, especially if it's got a reasonable battery and a good size range on it, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's something that I'm kind of thinking at next. Like, so not my next car, maybe the one after that, when they're a bit more available. Obviously, they're not out yet, but that's something that I'd be kind of looking for. It looks really good.
Yeah.
Really versatile vehicle.
Absolutely.
So it's definitely my radar. So you mentioned you're looking at an ID.3 as your next car potentially. Have you got any others in there that you're looking at? Is that mix?
Well, there's the ID.3. There's obviously, well, not obviously. I also like the ID.4, but again, from a financial point of view, and again, we've had this discussion on the podcast many times. I don't look at a car and say it's a £40,000 car, it's a £50,000 car, it's a £60,000 car. I look at it and say, this is how much it's going to cost me per month.
Yeah.
And that could be by, you know, having a 48-month or a 60-month loan or lease or PCP on it, or it could be by limiting the amount of miles or whatever. But if I know what my budget's going to be. We did find this morning that there is a version of the ID.4 that fits within the budget that I'm after. It's a slightly smaller battery than the one I was looking for, but I'm not going to rule it out just at the moment. But at the end of the day, it's a nice car, and there's a lot of similarities inside between the ID.3 and the ID.4. So if it's as good as the one that I've been driving today, then it's definitely a contender.
There's definitely a lot more space in the ID.4. A lot more space.
Yeah,
it's great.
But then again, the question is the two? I mean, there's plenty of space here for me. I don't have, I don't have a family. I don't have dogs, so you know, I don't really need a huge amount of space. So maybe the ID.4 is overkill. I don't know. I have also been in discussions with Kia about getting the new version of the Soul, which is the pure electric, the Max version. Lovely car, sat inside it at the dealership. It's a lot more. There's not as much room inside, but it's packaged in such a way that it feels a little bit more constricted, a little bit more confined. You know, you've got the central bit that sort of comes up. You don't have the open area, that sort of stuff. And I do like the e-Niro. I mean, the two cars I always see every day on the road, the Model 3 and the e-Niro. Without fail, I'm going to guarantee to see at least two each of those, probably four each of those on the road every time I'm out. So they're a very popular car, and quite rightly so. Everybody I know who's got one raves about them. I've had people on the podcast to talk specifically about them, and they love them. The problem is availability. Because they're so popular, they're just selling out. And
It's quite a long waiting list as well.
Well, I think the last time I looked, it was over 20-25 weeks. So the best part of 6 months to get one of those, which is no good for me because my lease runs out in 3.
So that was Gary's opinion. So I thought I'd make like a good little video to do, seeing as he's never really driven this before, and it's somebody coming to the car without any preconceptions about anything. They're kind of experiencing it firsthand for themselves, so that'd be quite useful for someone else who's in that same situation. I'll put a link to Gary's podcast in the comments. So thank you for watching. Do the usual, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.